The winter season for 2019 started off with specially painted 1801 leading Conway to Allentown 10N early in the morning on the second day of winter. The yellow main scheme is complemented by two Union Pacific SD70Ms for an all-EMD consist on this long and heavy manifest approaching Railroad Street in Myerstown. This is the first run of 1801 leading across the state since recently released into service in fall after undergoing months of testing along with 1800, solidifying the way for the SD70 AC rebuild program. The front portion of the train will be set off in Reading, with cars interchanged with Reading and Northern, and the rest broken down and dispersed to local customers. The most obvious being these maintenance-of-way ballast cars heading back for a refill at the quarries in Birdsboro. The rest of the train from here on will continue to the major Eastern Classification Yard in Allentown, which at this time still had its hump track in service, but would soon vanish as one of the many changes to come following the railroad's late adoption of the precision scheduled railroading philosophy announced in fall 2018. Many of the changes would start to roll out across 2019, though the operations of the Harrisburg Line remained largely unchanged over the winter. The most notable change at the beginning was the number of older locomotives going into storage and retirement, and I've started to make a dedicated video series looking back at their time in service. After completing their work in Reading, we await them at the Wesner Road crossing in Blandon behind part of the Giorgio mushroom plant. The overwhelming smell from the mushroom production isn't for the faint of heart, but this shot along the 0.6% low grade is worth the sound of EMDs lifting a train out of the Schuylkill River Valley. The WMX sign in the distance warns the engineer to sound the horn for multiple consecutive crossings, replacing individual signs for each road. Four sit close together in Blandon: Chestnut Street, Main Street on Route 73, the other end of Wesner Road, and Golding Road all in a half-mile stretch. Whistle posts are generally placed a quarter-mile from a road crossing, with distance adjusted for higher or lower than average speeds as necessary. There were 156 cars on this massive 10N into Reading, with only 80 remaining to the final destination just 20 more miles down the Reading line. A familiar horn in the distance pierces the cold, crisp air on a late December afternoon behind the remains of the once giant Bethlehem Steel Complex in Lebanon. If you've been rail fanning as long as I have, you just learn certain locomotives by their horns, especially if it's oddly unique. Such is the case with the off-sounding P5 on 4000, the AC-44 C6M class unit with a bright blue cab and gold main scheme, leading 19G west across Lincoln Avenue. At the time, 19G still followed the duties of the old Conrail OIPI, starting out of Oak Island with a destination of Conway Yard west of Pittsburgh. They work Allentown and Reading Yard on the way west. The head-end pickup at Reading is easily identifiable by cars off of the Reading and Northern, including this block of empty reefers and boxcars heading back to the west coast for more food and beverage products for the Kane warehouses near Scranton. The high side gonds full of waste and construction debris are also a common sight out of North Jersey for landfills in Ohio. Although the daylight hours of winter are short, the low arc of the sun in the sky creates fantastic lighting all day, especially for 15T running a 1 o'clock call time out of Allentown, traversing the Harrisburg Line in the late afternoon. The train enters the S-curve east of Myerstown, passing under Weavertown Road. The deck girder bridge is just high enough to satisfy the minimum clearance for double stacks. The telephoto view looking toward Railroad Street captures a couple boxcars experiencing hunting oscillation, an undesired level of lateral movement that can be caused by wheel wear or problems with the dampening system. There are detectors across each division that scan for wheel impact load, as well as excessive lateral movement that could damage infrastructure or lead to derailment. On January 5th, I caught 046, a special move with Department of Defense flat cars. The middle 12-axle car can handle a load up to 300 tons. Sources indicate it's carrying a nuclear submarine part for General Dynamics electric boat in Groton, Connecticut. Empty spacers provide protection on either side, as well as armed guards riding in the caboose. The Harrisburg Line runs east of the capital city, cutting across central Pennsylvania to Reading, where it turns southeast following the Schuylkill River to Philadelphia. These were two lines during the days of the Reading Railroad, the Lebanon Valley branch west of Reading, and the main line from Philadelphia to Pottsville. After the Conrail takeover, these sections were joined together as the Harrisburg Line, along with parts of the former PRR trackage from Belmont, over the West Philadelphia Elevated and Schuylkill Arsenal Bridge to Greenwich Yard. After the Conrail split in 1999, the latter became the CSX Harrisburg subdivision, with the Trenton sub beginning at Belmont. The NS Harrisburg Line ends at Falls, with a Y junction to the CSX Trenton sub for access to multiple branches of Conrail shared assets, including the Richmond Industrial Track at Nice, the Del Air branch at Park Junction, and the Chester Secondary at Eastwick, all of which are used by certain trains off of the NS Harrisburg Line. Almost every non-local NS train with an origin or destination in New Jersey will pass over Conrail shared assets, whether it's through traffic to a corporate-owned yard or one taken by a Conrail crew to a port or switched at a local or major industrial customer. That is the case with most unit trains like this 60N, loaded with imported Russian steel slabs at the port in Paulsboro, New Jersey. A Conrail crew takes it all the way to Falls Yard, eventually recrewed by NS for the journey west on the Harrisburg Line. You always know these trains are going by from the low-pitch rumbling that can be heard miles away, distinct from any other type of train. The guns may look empty from this vantage, though the solid steel slabs weighing up to 25 tons apiece line the bottom of the cars. The slabs are rolled at NLMK's mill in Lipetsk, heading for the conversion mill in Farrell, Pennsylvania for rolling into coils. While walking back to the car, I heard 25E on the scanner, so I stuck around. A quartet of GEs, including the Conrail Heritage Unit, race around the curve on Main 2, set to bypass 60N before Harrisburg Terminal. .25E is mostly sea containers from ports in Newark, New Jersey, heading to NS Chicago Landers Yard. Typically nocturnal or early morning through here, I don't recall why they're running late. 3 possible combinations are formed from 2 of the most common international container heights: standard 8'6" boxes and 9'6" high cubes. You can always tell a high cube by the yellow and black stripe on the header above the door. These 53-foot domestic high cubes don't have the markings because they never cross the ocean, but some do have written warnings on the sides and ends. I'm not sure if this block of domestics originated with the train in North Jersey or was picked up at Bethlehem. I moved to Richland, where an hour later 211 heads west, providing a very unusual sight: a long hood forward consist leading one of the highest priority intermodal trains. .211 usually has 3 units for the ride west and south to Atlanta, though I'm guessing problems with the 3rd unit forced a decision to toss it aside and run with the backwards-facing trailing power to prevent further delay. Here's something I've seen more often over the years: leaning double stacks like this car before the block of J.B. Hunt's. The lean must not have been enough concern for the car inspectors to rule a set-off before departure, and they've made it this far from Croxton without incident. I've read that a possible cause is a container placed into a well with an interbox connector still attached to one of the posts. Interbox connectors, or IBCs, are a set of conical pins with a twist lock that attach stacked containers at their corner castings, which are located 20 foot from center to match the 40-foot international standard. This is why a 53-foot box can be stacked on a 40 or even 45-foot sea container, since the extra dimensions protrude beyond the 40-foot interval. So if you ever spot a double stack listing slightly in one direction, it's possible an IBC is still attached to the bottom. I returned to the same spot the following Friday afternoon on the 18th, where something interesting happened, or at least for the day and age. An 874 off the Pokey for the Kearney's Point generating plant above Deepwater, New Jersey, slowly traverses east with 3 motors on the head end of a loaded set of rapid discharge hoppers. These cars are unloaded through the bottom hopper bays. unlike the high-sided gons that most coal is hauled in nowadays that use a rotary dumper to turn the car over. Both systems have their advantages and disadvantages, the main being while these cars are faster to unload, special care must be taken to maintain the hopper doors for proper function and sealing against leaks. High-sided gons generally have better net-to-tear ratio, allowing more load per car, justifying the extra expense of a rotary dumper. A once common sight, weekly coal movements have dwindled to single digits by this time in 2019 on the Harrisburg Line. Kearney's Point would continue to burn coal until May 2022. However, in the months prior, the contract was awarded to CSX, thus ending the occasional 874s and 506-507 pair. What makes today interesting is that a 507 is also barreling down on our location. I was hoping for a meet, but they ended up about 3 minutes apart, so I crossed the tracks for a different view of 507 running close to the 50-mile-per-hour track speed. I can't recall the last time a load and empty set of coal trains passed each other this close together. Before heading to work the following Wednesday morning, I saw a heads-up about 21E out of Morrisville with 3337 leading, a very uncommon sight for an SD40-2 leading a priority intermodal train. Fortunately, I was able to swing by Robezonia for their timely arrival on my way into the office. (3337) has been assigned to the Morrisville Sea Yard Intermodal Facility for several years. Like the 211 earlier in this video, some sort of failure with the original leader or trailing units prompted a quick decision to add the 3337 to keep things rolling west on time. Since the trailing SD70M is online, perhaps its cab signals failed, needed on both the Morrisville and Pittsburgh lines, as well as across SEPTA and Norristown. The last unit being offline makes me think the problem lies there, and the added SD40-2 provides enough power to keep the train moving at track speed. No trouble on the near 0.5% grade over South Mountain. Morrisville is just across the Delaware River from New Jersey's capital city of Trenton. 21E will work GI8 in Harrisburg before continuing to 47th Street Yard in Chicago, continuing the trend dating back to Conrail Mail 9. A couple days later, I'm back at Freeman Street in Robezonia for a well-timed 20K over my lunch break with the Penn Heritage unit leading. Originating at 63rd Street Yard in Chicago, 20K is expedited intermodal to Croxton. The yellow things with arms sticking up are empty flatbed racks for 53-foot trailer chassis. Apparently there was a bit more snow in the Midwest, with some still clinging to the train 24 hours and 750 miles after leaving the Windy City. Saturday's edition of 211 heads west at milepost 87 with a trio of armor yellow EMDs, approaching 16th Street in Lebanon, the former juncture of the Cornwall with the Reading Railroad. All that remains of the Cornwall is a small spur off on our right to Willow Street, and buildings that were part of the engine house along 22nd Street, now used by other industries. The cargo elevator in the background has gone a long time without rail service and wasn't active in 2019, though I believe shipments have since been restored. The next morning, I'm in Lebanon again, treated to overcast skies ahead of a winter storm moving into the area. The only train I decide to shoot on this Sunday is 18N with the nickel plate Heritage unit in the lead, heading through the many crossings with 4th Street closest our camera, west of milepost 86. All 25 cars are visible as motorists proceed across the tracks on the other side of town. At this time in 2019, 18N is still purely loaded autoracks from the Fostoria, Ohio Mixing Center, where different loads of automobiles are assembled. These are heading to the Doremus Avenue Automotive Terminal in Newark, New Jersey. On NS, cars are counted coupler to coupler, so these 140-foot articulated racks count as one car. On Tuesday, January 29th, we had enough snow in the forecast that a decision was made to work remotely. At lunchtime, I braved my way to Richland for 19G with an SD70M leading a fairly early train, even with working Reading. I've obviously shot hundreds of trains passing the feed mill and red brick house here over the years, though the steel buckets left behind by M&W workers would make a nice prop for several months. They're used to hold railroad spikes and anchors left over from a rail replacement project on Main 1 the previous spring. In the afternoon, the flakes were still making down, as we say around here in Pennsylvania Dutch English. I took a break to step out in the cold for 15T, also running on the earlier side with nothing special for power. but it's not always the locomotives that get me trackside, especially in winter weather like this, where no matter how many times you see a train, you can't beat the feeling of snow whisked in your face and then heading home to warm up with a nice cup of hot chocolate. The crisp and cool sunny days after a light powdery snowfall provide some of the best lit shots you can get throughout the year. 26E is usually out of Rutherford in the morning, making a prime-time run across the Harrisburg Line, soaking up the sun to their destination. .26E is a relatively new symbol, replacing 24K originating out of Rutherford the previous summer. Instead, the train now originates at 63rd Street, Chicago, picking up the Rutherford work en route on the way to Morrisville. Over lunch, I step out to Railroad Street in Myerstown for 19G. This is the location of a hotbox and dragging equipment defect detector at milepost 79.9. An SD70 Ace leads 2-9s. They had a later run out of Allentown today, but were able to maintain their usual time slot by not working Reading, as evidenced by the lack of cars off the Reading and Northern on the head end. Traffic assembled in Oak Island is at the front, including the usual block of high-side gons from Cardella, a waste management company based in North Bergen, New Jersey, handling the construction debris. Make a mental note about these cars and which train they are currently on, because that will change in the near future. The Allentown pickup sometimes does include cars from Reading, brought back by the H68 turn job that runs between the two yards, though most of their cars will go out on 11K, which runs under the cover of darkness at this time of year. Tens of thousands of wheels pass over the fins that, if struck, will notify something is dragging, as well as thermal sensors that scan temperature of the wheels and bearings. Over 99.9% of the time, there is not a problem, and the wayside announcement sounds something like this.
Norfolk Southern, milepost 79.9, track 1, no defects.
The star of the day showed up later in the afternoon at Richland, in the form of a very late 23M with the original Norfolk Southern Heritage unit in the lead. PTC issues and frozen switches compounded their delays. No complaints from me though, as the light doesn't get any better than this. Only 13 minutes behind is 15T, leaving me little time to relocate west of town where the shadows stretch across the fields in the last rays of the day. "1042 hit a garbage truck in Salem, Virginia in May 2016, resulting in the logoless hood on the conductor's side. February starts off with another light snowfall, and I'd catch a few trains in and around Richland throughout the day, starting with 6K4 through the ice-glazed rock cut. "6K4 is not a typo, though possibly generated in the system from one, since it does not follow the traditional rules of a letter prefix and suffix. Extra or second sections of 600 series trains would normally use the prefix Z, in this case Z4K. To my knowledge, tank car trains are the only ones that have had this middle letter symboling mishap. Regardless, 6K4 is another 64K, ethanol loads for the Chemical Coast in New Jersey. The ADM train set makes me think this originated at their plant in Decatur, Illinois. Later in the afternoon, I set up east of town at the Sunnens Road crossing for 16N, with a mixed generation of GEs pulling a rather short train for this run between Elkhart, Indiana and Allentown, that normally has a sizable consist comparable to 10N. "28 cars is all they had, and I returned to Richland where an hour later 21M approaches the town square with an SD70 Ace leading the usual train of domestic stacks and trailers. Later that night, I returned to Richland to catch H31 on their return trip east down Main 2. With the local running under the cover of darkness during the winter, I typically go months without shooting them, but made an exception when 5827 would lead back to Reading, wearing a unique Nathan K3LP horn. A few days later and I'm back at Richland around the same time in the evening, since it's about the only spot well lit enough to see trains at night. The occasion is M0N, with two of the Special Main units pulling a unit LPG tank car train off the Wheeling and Lake Erie, running separate from 10N. This train actually originated in Shire Oaks instead of Conway, resulting in the odd choice of loaded coal gons as buffer cars. Shire Oaks is where many coal trains are assembled from loads originating in the Mon Valley, often bound for export in Baltimore, so at some point these two loads will have to be shuttled back to Enola for reunion with a coal train. Saturday, February 9th was a clear but cold day. The high didn't reach above freezing, and plenty of steam rises from the Ironwood generating station, running full bore to meet peak electrical demand as homes and businesses try to stay warm. I couldn't pass the opportunity to catch 15T with an EMD trio passing under the steam as they climb Avon Hill in Prescott. A couple days later, the weather flipped back to snow again, and I await the track geometry train at Sunnens Road. The route engineers chose to cut and fill this segment instead of following the lowest point in the valley along the Topplehocken Creek a little over a mile to the north. A geometry train inspects the track geometry, taking three-dimensional measurements of the rail alignment down to the surface of the track bed to make sure everything is in check for smooth operation. The scanning equipment on this set is housed in a slug nicknamed the Brick, built from the frame of SD40 1620 in 2009. Number 38 also houses the power supply for itself and Research Coach 36, where the data is recorded and processed. The rail profile is also scanned, looking for fatigue or excessive wear, monitored by a team in real time. Slow orders are placed into effect when defects are found. NS has one other geometry train set, though it's unclear if these will be phased out as autonomous scanning equipment is added to locomotives, a system that's starting to roll out since its development in 2020. Skipping ahead 3 weeks to Sunday, March 3rd, I finally set out trackside again with a forecast of flurries turning to steady snow later in the day. Nothing is happening yet at 1:30 in the afternoon as 211 joins the Harrisburg Line at Wyomissing Junction with a newer pair of ACGEs. The mismatched head on the upper left signal replaced a single red lamp after mains 1 and 2 on the High Line into Reading were upgraded to bidirectional territory. Longtime viewers probably know, since I bring it up in almost every video, that 211 runs morning out of Croxton on weekdays and departs in the afternoon on Saturday. No 211 on Sunday meant the crew would deadhead for rest to catch Monday's 212 East. This changed in February when both trains were made daily out of Croxton and Atlanta, hence why we're seeing these guys on Sunday afternoon, as the weekend departures were kept later in the day. Auto Router seemed to like running trains opposing for some reason, as we'd see westbounds on 2 the rest of the day, with eastbounds coming down 1. A set of empty H1K hoppers often sit in lawn siding, awaiting their next assignment out of either Anvil or Birdsboro Quarry. I moved to Sinking Spring, where the flurries intensify while waiting for the next westbound. The gate arms of the 3 crossings fall consecutively for loaded trash train 63V working up the hill, powered by an SD70M and wide cab -8. On the way home, I stopped at Wilmelsdorf, where 4 trains would pass within the next half hour. First is 19G West through the Winter Wonderland, passing a western Berks County farmstead from our vantage at the north end of Brick Plant Road. By the time I wiped off my lens and packed up the tripod, I barely had enough time to make the short drive down the road to the crossing, though you bet I hurried when I heard a rare Leslie RS5T horn blowing for Richland in the distance. Here's where my comment about Auto Router preferring to run trains opposing the traditional right-hand flow did not work in my favor. 15T happened to be running up Main 2, and I'm not sure what they had for power, since 18N did not quite clear up in time. $20K is hot on the heels of 18N, so I went just down the road to the other side of Dorf, which normally offers an extensive view all the way past Brick Plant Road, but the wet and heavy flakes were reaching their peak precipitation when the pair of aces came into view. A bitter cold snap followed the week after the snowstorm. It's only 20 degrees this Tuesday morning in the first week of March, but despite the cold, the days are long enough that the sun now rises on the north side of the tracks at certain locations, such as here in Robezonia, where I stopped for 10N on my way into work to document the winter scene. NN is essentially the counterpart to 19G, after 18G was cut back to starting in Allentown instead of Conway, where 10N originates and thus ends in Allentown, where 18G collects cars for Oak Island and Croxton. At this time, 19G still made the full journey from Oak Island back to Conway, the old Conrail OIPI, but major changes are just a few months away that will scramble the old Conrail logic for good. Three months after catching 1801, Class Unit 1800, the other SD-70 ACC painted in the commemorative Caterpillar Yellow Main scheme, leads Tanker Train 64T at Richland. These are ethanol loads from the ADM plant in Decatur, Illinois, to Kinder Morgan in Port Richmond, northeast of Philadelphia. Some of the tank cars, including the buffers on each end, are part of ADM's fleet of rolling stock. With mostly clear skies and sheets of white still donning the landscape, I devote most of Saturday, March 9th to rail fanning. I got an early start for the morning intermodal rush with 294 dropping down the hill from Prescott, heading eastbound at Ramona Road. .294 is domestic boxes from 47th Street, Chicago, to the NS E-Rail Intermodal Terminal in Elizabeth, New Jersey. Evidently some recent work on the crossing, by installing a new track panel and paving over it, left a joint in the rail that has yet to be welded. "20 minutes later at Prescott, we get a well-timed meet between 21E and 20Q. Two walls of containers pass each other, one originating in Morrisville for Chicago, and the other heading to Morrisville. 20Q traditionally ran through here at night, but in February they picked up additional work in Rutherford, resulting in a morning departure. The community of Prescott actually sits a mile east of here, though NS settled on the name when they added these crossovers in the early 2000s during the bidirectional signal upgrades. Just west of the eastbound signal was known as CP Avon during Conrail, where the local train could enter the Avon industrial track that at the time ran as far as 5th Street in Lebanon, but the closure of the San Giorgio pasta plant at the turn of the millennia left NS truncating it to 11th Avenue. After going for breakfast at Mel's Diner, I returned trackside at 15th Avenue in Avon. Although much of the industry has left downtown Lebanon, the Lebanon Seaboard Corporation and the ever-expanding Triple M feeds are alive and well just east of the city limits. A brand new ST-70 Ace is head out on 21M, passing through the signals at Prescott and over the switch to the Avon industrial track. It's hard to believe a locomotive introduced in 2004 was still being produced 15 years later. 1194 is not even a month old in this shot, rolling out of Progress Rail in February. Although the ST-70 Ace does not meet Tier 4 standards, it does exceed Tier 3. The late batches of ST-70 Aces on NS and Union Pacific are known as Tier 4 credit units. Federal emission standards allow manufacturers to accrue credits for every Tier 4 unit produced in order to later extend production of those beating the previous tier. Production of the credit units is limited to no more than Tier 4 unit production. The rear of the train heads under the US 422 overpass, entering Lebanon city limits on the other side at 11th Avenue, where the Avon industrial track rejoins Main 1. I went home for a couple hours until the afternoon rush kicked into gear. I set up in a field west of Richland overlooking the town. 2-9s in the older thoroughbred scheme pull I-43 and its train of brightly colored sea containers out of the cut and across the rural landscape. This scene is a favorite of mine since it captures the essence of Lebanon County, a red barn and the town's water tower that has the visual appearance of the hundreds of farm silos scattered across the valley. I-43 is a second or delayed section of 243, a new train that went into effect in January out of Global Container Terminal's Bayonne Express Rail facility at Port Jersey, with a destination of GI-8 in Harrisburg. My guess is 243 was added to handle the extra tonnage that couldn't fit on the already maxed out 23Ms. Likewise, counterpart 242 out of Harrisburg handles the extra tonnage of 22V. Speaking of Tier 4 SD-70 Ace credit units, what are the odds I'd also catch one of Union Pacific's leading 211 after returning to Prescott in the same day? 9072 is still looking fresh, having rolled out of Muncie, Indiana in 2017 as part of a 100-unit order, corresponding with the 100 Tier 4 SD-70 Aces numbered 3000 to 3099. Problems with the Tier 4 SD-70 Aces meant UP never rostered all 100, 88 of which were production units, and 12 demonstrators acquired from EMD. Several were returned or rejected, and many remain in storage. UP also received 8 more Tier 4 credit Aces at the end of 2018. With 15T right behind them, I stick around and opt for a wider view across the field. Empty panel flats make a nice addition to today's train, having dropped off prefabricated switches somewhere along the line for interlocking turnout or industry switch upgrades that will commence in spring when maintenance season goes into full effect. In fact, most cars on 15T are returning empty, working Hagerstown, Maryland, Shenandoah and Roanoke, Virginia, as well as Knoxville, Tennessee on the way south to Birmingham, Alabama. The next day I'm having a bit of deja vu since it's the second overcast Sunday morning the nickel plate Heritage unit is working its way east on the Harrisburg Line, this time leading 14G between Conway and Morrisville. "14G was easily identifiable before its elimination to PSR, including coil cars for U.S. Steel and Fairless, blocks of corn syrup for Tate and Lyle down Delmore Avenue on Conrail Shared Assets, and 86-foot auto parts boxcars for the GM Distribution Center next to Morrisville Yard. 86-foot high cubes are favored for their spacious interior that can be packed with pallets of lightweight aftermarket parts. A rule of thumb is the smaller the car, the more dense and heavier the load, while larger cars maximize space for lightweight cargo that may cube out before reaching max load limit. Also on the train are a variety of petroleum products for the East Coast and several tanks of vinyl chloride, the monomer made famous in the East Palestine derailment in winter of '23. It is primarily used in the production of PVC, which can be found in piping, building materials, and the hard plastics in your car's interior, contributing to the toxic off-gassing and that new car smell everyone claims to love. Automotive manufacturers have scaled back their use of PVC, though vinyl chloride will likely remain a key industrial material hauled on the rails. Skipping ahead to next weekend, it's sunny again with a high of 46. All the snow is finally melted, and I decide to stop at East Street on the way home from my usual Saturday diner breakfast in Lebanon. The only thing of interest is 20K with an SD70 ACU leader, which I haven't seen in a while. As I was setting up, 60N snuck up westbound. These have been running sporadically because of issues with tariffs on foreign steel, so I decide to hit record. It's free after all, except the burden on hard drive space. Little did I know that 60N would be one of the first trains on the chopping block for PSR-related changes, with only a few more months as a standalone unit train, before the powers to be decided to break the train into smaller cuts added to a mixed freight, effectively making one giant slow-moving, overweight, and underpowered land barge that works en route with these cars at the head end. Smart thinking, likely from someone who has never run a train. Only 3 minutes later, the anticipated 20K rolls into view, accelerating back to track speed of 50 after obeying the 40-mile-per-hour head-end only restriction through downtown Lebanon. That's all for this video, and I hope you enjoyed this past hour of trains on the Norfolk Southern Harrisburg Line over the winter season of 2019, which was arguably the last winter of the good old days of rail fanning before PSR and the upcoming COVID epidemic changed this line for good. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the spring for another hour of catches from my local rail fanning adventures.